The massive space station Nexus Prime floated in the dark void between star systems. Its metal corridors buzzed with activity as alien delegates from across the galaxy gathered for the monthly Galactic Council meeting. The station was neutral ground, a place where different species could meet without fear of attack. In the main assembly hall, hundreds of beings filled the curved seats. Some breathed oxygen like humans did. Others needed special masks or tanks of different gases. The Zephyrians sat tall and proud, their blue skin gleaming under the bright lights. Their leader, Ambassador Keithtar, wore the golden robes that showed his high rank in their empire. The crystalline beings looked like living diamonds, their bodies catching and reflecting light in rainbow patterns. The hegemony representatives were covered in thick fur and had 6 arms each. Every species was different, but they all shared one thing. They all believed they were better than the humans of Earth. Ambassador Keithtar stood up from his seat. His voice was deep and commanding as he spoke to the assembly. Fellow council members, today we discuss the expansion into the Sol system. The humans have watched the stars for decades now. They have seen our ships. They know we exist. It is time to bring them into our galactic community. Many aliens nodded their heads in agreement. The human solar system was small but rich in resources. Earth had water, metals, and billions of workers who could serve the greater galactic empire. It seemed like an easy target. The humans are primitive, continued Keithtar. They still fight wars with chemical explosives and metal bullets. Their fastest ships barely reach their own moon. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light travel. One of our cruisers could defeat their entire military. Laughter echoed through the hall. The idea of humans resisting advanced alien technology seemed silly to most of the delegates. They had conquered dozens of primitive worlds before. Earth would be no different. But in the back of the assembly, an old figure slowly stood up. Councillor Vexhai of the Thalorian Collective was ancient even by his species' long-lived standards. His skin was pale gray and covered in scars from 1,000 battles. His people had survived more galactic wars than any other species. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but somehow everyone heard it. I must speak against this proposal, Vexhai said. The laughter stopped. Other delegates turned to look at the old Thalorian with surprise. His people rarely spoke in council meetings anymore. They preferred to stay out of galactic politics. Ambassador Keithtar looked annoyed. Councillor Vexhai, with respect, your people have become too careful in your old age. The humans pose no threat to anyone. This will be a simple conquest. Vexhai walked slowly to the center of the hall. Each step seemed to take great effort. When he reached the speaking platform, he looked around at all the alien faces watching him. 20 years ago, he began, a Thalorian exploration ship encountered humans for the first time. The details of this meeting were classified by order of the High Command. But I was there. I was the ship's captain. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Most delegates had never heard of this first contact event. The official record said humans had never met aliens before. We found a human ship far from Earth, Vexhai continued. It was small and damaged. Only 3 humans were aboard. Their life support was failing. Any reasonable species would have surrendered and begged for rescue. The old alien paused as if remembering something painful. But these humans did not surrender. When we offered to save them, they demanded to know our intentions. When we told them we represented a galactic empire, they asked if we planned to conquer Earth. We told them the truth. Earth would eventually join the galactic community, by choice or by force. Vexhai's voice grew darker. The humans looked at each other. Then the leader, a female named Sarah Chen, spoke words I will never forget. She said, "Then we are enemies," just like that. 3 dying humans in a broken ship declared war on an empire of 1 trillion beings. Some delegates laughed nervously. Others stayed silent, sensing there was more to the story. They refused our rescue, Vexhai said. They chose to die in the cold of space rather than help us learn about their world. But before their ship lost power, they did something that still haunts me. They sent a message back to Earth. A warning that aliens existed and that they planned to conquer humanity. Ambassador Keithtar waved his hand dismissively. One incident 20 years ago means nothing. 3 fanatics do not represent an entire species. But Vexhai was not finished. I decided to test this theory. I took a small fleet to Earth to observe these humans more closely. What I saw there changed everything I thought I knew about intelligent life. The assembly hall was now completely quiet. Even the background hum of the station's air recycling system seemed loud. I watched their news broadcasts, HFY said. I studied their history files. I observed their military exercises. And I learned something terrifying about humans. They have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. Not just small conflicts, but massive wars that killed millions. Wars over resources, over religion, over ideas, over land. That proves they are violent and primitive, Kethtar interrupted. No, HFY replied firmly. It proves something much worse. In all those thousands of years of warfare, humans have developed one skill better than any other species in the galaxy. They have learned how to never give up. The old Thalorian's words hung in the air like a threat. I watched recordings of their ancient battles, he continued. I saw cities under siege for years with people eating rats and tree bark rather than surrender. I saw armies fighting until every soldier was dead. I saw entire populations choose death over slavery. HFY pointed at the assembled delegates. When was the last time any of your species fought to the last being? When did your people ever choose extinction over surrender? Most of you have never even considered such a thing. Some aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was true that most galactic species preferred negotiation to warfare. When faced with superior force, they usually found ways to compromise. But humans are different, HFY said. I watched their historical records of something they call the Second World War. An entire planet at war for 6 years. Cities bombed to rubble, but the humans kept fighting. Millions dead, but they never stopped. And in the end, the most evil humans were defeated not by negotiation, not by compromise, but by other humans who refused to accept evil in their world. The assembly was getting restless. This was supposed to be a simple discussion about conquering a primitive world. Instead, they were getting a history lesson about human stubbornness. Counselor HFY, said Ambassador Kethtar, your stories are interesting, but they change nothing. Ancient human history means nothing against modern weapons. Our ships can destroy their cities from orbit. Our armies have armor they cannot pierce. Our technology is thousands of years ahead of theirs. HFY turned to face the Zephyrian ambassador directly. That is exactly what every human enemy has thought. The stronger force always believed they would win quickly. But humans do not fight the way we fight. When we lose a battle, we retreat and regroup. When we lose a war, we surrender and accept new terms. The old alien's voice grew cold. When humans lose a battle, they learn from it and fight differently next time. When they lose a war, they go underground and keep fighting. When you kill their soldiers, their civilians become soldiers. When you destroy their cities, they fight from the ruins. When you think you have won, you discover the war has just begun. Enough of this, Kethtar said loudly. I call for a vote. All in favor of bringing the Sol system into the galactic community through military action. Hands and tentacles and other appendages rose throughout the assembly. Species after species voted to attack Earth. The Zephyrians, the Crystalline Confederacy, the hegemony of Thousand Suns, the Aquatic Dominion, and dozens of smaller governments all agreed. Only the Thalorians voted against the proposal. The final count was overwhelming. 417 votes in favor, only 12 against. Ambassador Kethtar smiled with satisfaction. The motion passes. The Sol system will be conquered within one standard galactic year. But HFY was not finished. He stood up one more time, his old voice somehow carrying to every corner of the massive hall. You have made a terrible mistake, he said. You think you are voting to conquer a primitive world, but you are really voting to wake up something that has been sleeping. For 20 years, humans have known we exist. For 20 years, they have been preparing for this day. The old alien looked around the assembly one last time. I have seen the footage from their military bases. I have watched them build new weapons and train new soldiers. I have observed them putting aside their differences and working together for the first time in their history. All because 3 humans chose to die rather than let their world be conquered without warning. HFY began walking slowly back to his seat, but his final words echoed through the hall like a prophecy of doom. You believe you are about to conquer Earth, but Earth is about to conquer you. And when the humans come for you, and they will come for you, remember that an old Thalorian tried to warn you. Do not attack the humans. They will never surrender to you. They will never stop hunting you, and they will never forgive you for what you are about to do. The assembly fell silent as HFY sat down. For a moment, doubt crept into the minds of some delegates. But the moment passed quickly. They were advanced galactic civilizations with weapons beyond human imagination. What could primitive Earth possibly do to them? Ambassador Kethtar called the meeting to an end. As the delegates filed out of the hall, they talked excitedly about dividing up the resources of the Sol system. Some argued about which species would get the most valuable planets. Others planned trading routes through human space. None of them paid attention to Vexai, who sat alone in the empty assembly hall long after everyone else had left. The old Thalorian stared at the star charts displayed on the main screen, showing the location of Earth in the galaxy. He whispered words that no one else heard. "Forgive me, humans. I tried to save them from you, but they would not listen. Now you must save yourselves from them, and may the universe have mercy on us all when you do." Far away in the Sol system, human satellites detected the massive alien fleet already gathering in nearby star systems. The warning that 3 brave humans had died to send was finally proving true. War was coming to Earth. But the aliens had no idea that humans had spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment. They did not know about the underground bunkers, the hidden weapons factories, the secret research programs, or the detailed plans for resistance that every human government had developed. Most importantly, they did not understand the one thing that Vexai had tried to warn them about. Humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something new in the galaxy, something that had never existed before. They were a species that would rather die than live as slaves, and that made them the most dangerous enemy any galactic empire could ever face. The Zephyrian Third Fleet moved through space like a metal storm. 50 massive warships, each one larger than anything humans had ever built, approached the Sol system with confidence. Admiral Costel stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen. The planet looked so peaceful from space. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. It was hard to believe that 9 billion humans lived on that small world. To the Admiral, they seemed like insects in a hive, ready to be scattered by superior force. "Admiral," reported his communications officer, "we are detecting numerous human satellites and space stations. Should we destroy them?" Costel considered the question. The human satellites were primitive compared to Zephyrian technology, but they were clearly watching the alien fleet approach. "Leave them for now. Let the humans see what they face. Fear will make them surrender faster." The bridge crew nodded. This was standard Zephyrian military doctrine. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, then occupy the planet with minimal resistance. They had done it dozens of times before on other primitive worlds. "Open communication channels to Earth," Costel ordered. "All frequencies, all languages." The communications array powered up and began broadcasting toward Earth. The Admiral had prepared his surrender demand carefully. It was translated into every human language their computers could decode. "People of Earth," his voice boomed across radio waves, television signals, and internet connections. "I am Admiral Costel of the Zephyrian Empire. Your planet is now under the protection of the Galactic Council. You will cease all military activities immediately. Your governments will report to our landing forces for new instructions. Any resistance will be met with destruction. You have 1 hour to comply." On Earth, the message reached every corner of the planet simultaneously. In government bunkers, military commanders, and civilian emergency centers, humans received the ultimatum they had been expecting for 20 years. President Martinez of the United Earth Defense Alliance was in the deep bunker beneath Colorado when the message arrived. Around her sat the leaders of every major nation on Earth. For the first time in human history, old enemies had become allies in the face of an external threat. "Well," said General Harrison, the military commander, "it is finally happening. Are we ready?" President Martinez looked around the room. Chinese Premier Wang, Russian President Volkov, European Union Director Schmidt, African Federation President Okafor, and dozens of other leaders nodded grimly. For 20 years they had prepared for this moment. "Send the response," Martinez said. The reply that went back to the Zephyrian fleet was simple and direct. "This is President Martinez speaking for the United Earth Defense Alliance. We reject your demands. Earth is not for sale, rent, or conquest. If you want our world, you will have to take it from our dead hands." Admiral Costel blinked in confusion when he heard the response. In his long military career, he had never received such a direct rejection. Most species tried to negotiate or ask for better terms. A few begged for mercy, but none had ever simply said no. "Are you certain that message was translated correctly?" he asked his communications officer. "Yes, Admiral. The humans are refusing to surrender." Costel shook his head. Clearly, the humans did not understand their situation very well. Begin orbital bombardment of their military installations. Target their capital cities as well. Once they see our power, they will reconsider. The Zephyrian fleet spread out around Earth like a net of death. Energy weapons that could melt mountains began firing at human military bases, government buildings, and major cities. The attacks were precise and devastating. Ancient structures that had stood for centuries were reduced to glowing craters in seconds. But something unexpected happened. Instead of panicking, humans around the world began responding in ways the aliens had never seen before. In New York City, as Zephyrian bombers screamed overhead, civilians did not run in terror. Instead, they helped soldiers set up anti-aircraft guns on rooftops. Office workers carried ammunition. School teachers operated communication equipment. Everyone became part of the defense effort. In Moscow, when alien ground forces landed in Red Square, they found the city empty above ground. But beneath the streets, in metro tunnels and hidden bunkers, thousands of Russian soldiers waited. The moment the aliens tried to occupy government buildings, bullets began flying from every direction. In Beijing, Chinese engineers worked frantically to reverse engineer pieces of alien technology that had crashed during the bombardment. Within hours, they had figured out how alien energy shields worked and began developing countermeasures. Admiral Costel watched the reports from his ground forces with growing confusion. This was not how conquests were supposed to work. By now, human leaders should be offering surrender terms. Instead, resistance was getting stronger. "Admiral," reported Colonel Zefak from the surface, "we have taken the human capital of Washington, but we are under constant attack. The humans are using primitive weapons, but they seem to be everywhere. We destroy one group and two more appear." "What do you mean everywhere?" Costel demanded. "Sir, they are attacking us from buildings, from underground tunnels, from vehicles disguised as civilian transport. We captured a human supply depot, but it exploded when we entered. The humans had booby-trapped their own equipment rather than let us use it." Similar reports came in from landing sites around the globe. In London, Zephyrian soldiers found Big Ben rigged with explosives. The humans had destroyed their own famous landmark, rather than let aliens use it as a headquarters. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower had been turned into a massive radio antenna that jammed alien communications. What confused the Zephyrians most was the level of cooperation they saw among humans. Their intelligence reports had said that Earth was divided into dozens of competing nations that regularly fought each other. But now, American soldiers were fighting alongside Chinese soldiers. Russian equipment was being operated by Japanese technicians. African engineers were working with European scientists. How is this possible? Costel asked his intelligence officer. Our report said these humans were constantly at war with each other. They were, Admiral, but apparently, when faced with an external threat, they have united against us. The Admiral felt the first stirring of doubt. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced a species that became stronger when attacked. Most civilizations collapsed when their governments and military bases were destroyed, but humans seemed to fight harder when they had less to lose. On the surface, human resistance was taking forms the Zephyrians had never encountered. In Tokyo, a group of elderly Japanese citizens had volunteered for suicide missions, driving vehicles loaded with explosives into alien positions. In Cairo, Egyptian archaeologists were using their knowledge of ancient tunnel systems to move weapons and supplies beneath the city. But the most disturbing reports came from the human information networks. Instead of spreading panic and demands for surrender, human media was broadcasting instructions for resistance. Television stations showed civilians how to make explosives from household chemicals. Radio programs taught guerrilla warfare tactics. Internet sites shared intelligence about alien weaknesses and equipment. Dr. Sarah Chen, granddaughter of the human who had first warned Earth about the aliens, was broadcasting from a hidden location somewhere in North America. Her message reached humans around the world. "My grandmother died 20 years ago to warn us this day would come," she said. "She and her crew chose death rather than help aliens learn about our world. Today we honor their sacrifice. Every human who fights, every human who resists, every human who refuses to surrender, carries on their legacy." The broadcast continued with practical information. Alien energy weapons are powerful but require direct line of sight. Use mirrors and reflective surfaces to redirect their fire. Their armor is strong but has joints at the knees and elbows. Their communication equipment operates on specific frequencies that can be jammed with modified radio equipment. Admiral Costell ordered his forces to find and destroy the human broadcast stations. But every time they shut down one transmission, 3 more began broadcasting from different locations. The humans had somehow created a communication network that could not be completely destroyed. Worse, the content of human broadcasts was beginning to affect alien morale. Zephyrian soldiers heard humans talking about their families, their homes, their determination to never surrender. Many of the alien troops had joined the military for steady pay and easy conquests. They had never expected to fight an enemy that preferred death to defeat. After 3 days of fighting, Admiral Costell requested a conference with his ground commanders. The holographic meeting included officers from every major landing site on Earth. "Report," the Admiral ordered. Colonel Zefak spoke first. "Sir, we have taken most major human cities, but we do not control them. Human fighters appear and disappear like ghosts. We have lost 30% of our ground vehicles to attacks by humans using primitive weapons." 30%? Costell was shocked. "How is that possible?" "The humans are using their own infrastructure against us, sir. They collapse tunnels when our troops are inside them. They poison their own water supplies rather than let us use them. They destroy bridges and roads to slow our movements, even though it also hurts their own people." Another officer added, "Admiral, the humans are not fighting like any enemy we have faced before. When we attack their military bases, their soldiers retreat and fight from civilian areas. When we attack civilian areas, the civilians become soldiers. There seems to be no distinction between their military and their population." The most disturbing report came from Major Kethnil, who was commanding forces in Europe. "Sir, we captured a human prisoner yesterday. We offered him food, medical treatment, and protection in exchange for information about resistance activities." "And?" the Admiral asked. "He refused, sir. He chose to die rather than help us. But before he died, he said something I cannot understand. He said that every alien we kill makes 10 more humans willing to die fighting us. He said that the harder we fight, the stronger human resistance becomes." Admiral Costell ended the conference feeling more confused than ever. In his military training, he had learned that conquering a planet required destroying the enemy's ability to fight, and their will to fight. But somehow, the Zephyrians were managing to make both of these things stronger. That night, as he stood alone on his ship's observation deck looking down at Earth, the Admiral saw the lights of human cities still burning. Despite days of bombardment, despite occupation by alien forces, despite thousands of casualties, the humans had not given up. For the first time in his career, Admiral Costell began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The conquest of Earth was supposed to take days, not weeks. His casualties were mounting. His supply lines were under constant attack, and human resistance showed no signs of weakening. But orders were orders. The Galactic Council expected Earth to be conquered and pacified. The Admiral's career depended on completing this mission successfully. He could not afford to fail. What Costell did not know was that his problems were just beginning. The human resistance was about to enter a new phase. For 20 years, Earth's best scientists and engineers had been developing weapons and tactics specifically designed to fight advanced alien technology. The initial defense had been just the beginning. In hidden factories around the world, humans were building new weapons based on captured alien technology. In secret laboratories, scientists were developing biological agents that could affect alien physiology. In underground command centers, military strategists were planning operations that would take the war beyond Earth itself. The aliens had expected to conquer a primitive world in a matter of days. Instead, they had awakened something that had been preparing for this moment for 20 years. And now that humans understood what they were fighting, the real war was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the Zephyrian invasion began, and the galaxy was starting to take notice. What was supposed to be a quick conquest had turned into a brutal stalemate. Reports from Earth reached alien worlds across the galaxy, and the news was disturbing to every species that had voted for the invasion. On the neutral trading station Kepler's Rest, alien merchants gathered in the central marketplace to exchange goods and gossip. The conversation always turned to the same topic these days: the humans and their impossible resistance. Merchant Captain Veltar of the Aquatic Dominion was explaining the situation to a group of newer traders. "I have a cousin in the Zephyrian Third Fleet," he said. his voice making bubble sounds through his breathing apparatus. He says the humans have learned to use our own weapons against us. They steal our equipment and somehow make it work with their primitive technology. A crystalline trader named Quartz's Heart chimed in with a sound like glass bells. My government receives daily reports from the Zephyrian Empire. They are requesting more soldiers, more ships, more weapons. How many resources does it take to conquer one small planet? The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it out loud. The conquest of Earth was failing, and it was costing the Zephyrian Empire more than anyone had expected. Back on Earth, the war had evolved into something completely different from what Admiral Costel had planned. The humans had stopped trying to defend fixed positions. Instead, they had embraced what they called total resistance. Every human was now considered a combatant, and every piece of Earth was a battlefield. In the ruins of what used to be New York City, a group of human engineers worked in the remains of a subway tunnel. They had discovered that Zephyrian energy shields had a specific frequency that could be disrupted by modified human radio equipment. The aliens' greatest defensive advantage was becoming useless. Dr. James Walker, a former NASA scientist, led the engineering team. The key is understanding how their technology works, he explained to his team. They use quantum field manipulation for their energy shields, but the quantum fields can be destabilized if you know the right frequencies. His assistant, Maria Santos, looked up from her work on a captured alien weapon. Doctor, I think I have figured out how to reverse the power flow on their plasma rifles. If we can modify the energy cells, we can make their own weapons explode when they try to fire them. This was happening all over Earth. In hidden laboratories and secret workshops, humans were not just copying alien technology, they were improving it, modifying it, and turning it against its creators. The same innovative spirit that had taken humans from horse-drawn carts to space travel, in less than 2 centuries was now focused entirely on defeating an alien occupation. Admiral Costel received the daily reports with growing alarm. Human sabotage had destroyed 3 of his supply ships in the past week. Mysterious explosions kept damaging alien equipment, even in areas that were supposed to be secure. Worst of all, his soldiers were starting to show signs of what military doctors called chronic stress syndrome. Admiral, reported his chief medical officer, our troops are experiencing psychological problems we have never seen before. The constant threat of human attacks, the knowledge that any civilian could be an enemy combatant, the fact that we cannot secure any area completely, it is affecting our soldiers' ability to function. Costel understood the problem. Zephyrian military doctrine was based on quick, overwhelming victories. Their soldiers were trained to fight conventional wars against organized armies. They were not prepared for an enemy that never stopped fighting, never surrendered, and never followed any recognizable rules of warfare. The psychological pressure was made worse by human propaganda broadcasts that somehow reached Zephyrian communication networks. The humans had learned to hack alien computer systems and were using them to spread their own messages. One broadcast that particularly disturbed alien forces came from an elderly human woman named Elena Volkov. She spoke calmly to the camera, her words translated into several alien languages. To the soldiers of the Zephyrian Empire, I want you to know something about the planet you are trying to conquer. This is my home. My grandfather fought against invaders in the Second World War. My father fought against different invaders in the Cold War. I fought against economic oppression and the resource wars my daughter is fighting against. You right now? The old woman's voice remained, steady as she continued. You think you are fighting one generation of humans, but you are fighting all of us. Every human who ever lived, every human who ever died for freedom, every human who ever refused to surrender. We are all here with you now, and we will never stop fighting. These broadcasts were having an effect throughout the galaxy. Other species that had supported the invasion were beginning to have second thoughts. The hegemony of Thousand Suns, which had territorial disputes with the Zephyrian Empire, began to see an opportunity. In the hegemony capital, Chancellor Raktul met with his military advisors. How many ships has the Zephyrian Empire committed to this Earth conquest? He asked. Nearly half their total fleet, Chancellor, replied General Kesmar, and they are requesting more every month. Their resources are being drained by this one planet. The Chancellor's 6 eyes gleamed with interest. And their border defenses? Weakened significantly. They have moved most of their forces to the Sol system, or to supply lines supporting the Earth invasion. This was exactly what the hegemony had been waiting for. For decades, they had wanted to reclaim star systems that the Zephyrians had taken from them, but the Zephyrian military had always been too strong. Now, for the first time, they were vulnerable. Begin moving our fleets toward the disputed border systems, Chancellor Raktul ordered. If the Zephyrians want to waste their strength fighting primitive humans, we will take advantage of their mistake. Similar conversations were happening in governments across the galaxy. The Crystalline Confederacy saw a chance to expand their trade routes. The Aquatic Dominion wanted to reclaim waterworlds that had been under Zephyrian control. Dozens of smaller species began to think about old grievances and new opportunities. But it was not just governments that were taking notice of the human resistance. Individual aliens were also beginning to react to the stories coming from Earth. On the mining world of Kepler 438b, a group of hegemony workers had been forced to labor in dangerous conditions for years. Their overseer was a Zephyrian administrator who treated them like property. But after hearing broadcasts about human resistance, some of the workers began to talk quietly among themselves. The humans refused to accept slavery, whispered Korthal, a hegemony miner. They would rather die than live as we do. His friend Bessikar nodded. I heard that human workers destroyed their own factories rather than let them be used by the invaders. Can you imagine having such courage? The idea was spreading. If humans could resist the mighty Zephyrian Empire, maybe other oppressed species could resist their own oppressors. The concept of absolute resistance to tyranny was something new in galactic politics. On Earth, the humans were preparing for the next phase of their resistance. The initial defense had proven that they could survive an alien invasion. The guerrilla warfare phase had shown that they could make occupation costly and difficult. Now they were ready to take the war to the enemy. In a hidden facility beneath the Australian desert, human scientists had achieved something remarkable. They had successfully reverse-engineered Zephyrian faster-than-light travel technology. Not only that, but they had improved it. Dr. Chen, who had become one of the leaders of human research efforts, stood before a gathering of military commanders and scientists. We have built our first faster-than-light ship, she announced. It is not large, but it is fast and very difficult to detect. More importantly, we have learned how to track Zephyrian supply convoys. General Harrison, now commanding all Earth resistance forces, studied the technical specifications. How many ships can we build? With current resources, maybe 50 small ships in the next 6 months, Dr. Chen replied. But remember, we do not need to match their fleet ship for ship. We just need to hit their supply lines and make their occupation more expensive than they can afford. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Human ships would leave Earth and attack Zephyrian supply convoys throughout nearby star systems. They would not try to win major battles. Instead, they would make every supply run dangerous and expensive. But the humans planned to do more than just attack ships. They were going to spread their message throughout the galaxy. In a secret meeting with Earth's top military and political leaders, President Martinez outlined the new strategy. We are not just fighting for Earth anymore, she said. We are fighting for the idea that free beings should never be slaves. Every species in the galaxy that is oppressed by the Zephyrians or any other empire needs to hear our message. The message was simple, but revolutionary. Resistance was possible. Tyranny could be defeated, and freedom was worth any price. Human ships began leaving Earth in secret, using modified alien technology to avoid detection. Their missions were dangerous, and many ships did not return. But those that did return brought back intelligence about alien supply routes, military installations, and most importantly, other oppressed species that might be willing to join the resistance. Within weeks, Zephyrian supply convoys throughout the galaxy began reporting attacks by unknown ships. The attackers never stayed to fight major battles. They would appear suddenly, destroy cargo ships or supply depots, broadcast messages about human resistance, and then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. Admiral Costel received reports of these attacks with growing panic. His invasion of Earth was already consuming more resources than the Zephyrian Empire could easily afford. Now his supply lines were under attack throughout the galaxy. Admiral, reported his logistics officer, we have lost 12 supply convoys in the past month. The attacks appear to be coordinated, but we cannot identify the attackers. Their ships are small and fast, using modified versions of our own technology. Costel knew what this meant, even if he did not want to admit it. The humans had somehow developed space combat capability and were taking the war beyond Earth. The primitive species that was supposed to surrender in days was now threatening Zephyrian interests across multiple star systems. But the worst news was yet to come. Intelligence reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Species that had been peacefully under Zephyrian rule for decades were beginning to rebel. Workers on mining worlds were sabotaging equipment. Farmers on agricultural planets were destroying crops rather than feed Zephyrian armies. Even some Zephyrian colonies were reporting unrest among local populations. All of these rebellions had one thing in common. The rebels claimed inspiration from the human resistance on Earth. Chancellor Raktul of the Hegemony had been watching these developments with great interest. The time had come to act. In a secret message to other alien governments, he proposed a formal alliance against the Zephyrian Empire. "The humans have shown us something important," his message read. "The Zephyrians are not invincible. Their empire can be defeated, but only if we work together." The galaxy was beginning to change. What had started as the conquest of one small planet was becoming a war that threatened the entire Zephyrian Empire. And at the center of it all were 9 billion humans who had simply refused to surrender. Admiral Costel sat in his command center, surrounded by reports of disasters throughout Zephyrian space. For the first time in his career, he began to understand what Counselor Vexai had tried to warn the Galactic Council about. The humans were not just another primitive species to be conquered. They were something new and dangerous. They were a species that would rather fight forever than live in chains, and now their example was spreading throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The Admiral realized that the Zephyrian Empire faced a choice. They could commit even more resources to destroying Earth completely, risking the loss of their entire empire to rebellions and enemy attacks, or they could try to find a way to end this war before it destroyed them. But he also realized that the humans would never accept any peace that left them under alien rule. The only way to end this war was to give the humans what they wanted: complete independence and the right to be left alone. The problem was that admitting defeat to a primitive species would destroy Zephyrian prestige throughout the galaxy. Other species would see it as proof that the Empire was weak and could be challenged. Either way, Admiral Costel knew that his invasion of Earth had already succeeded in one way that he had never intended. It had changed the galaxy forever. The age of easy conquest was over. From now on, every species that wanted to remain free would remember what the humans had done. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human ships continued their deadly work, carrying a message that was more dangerous than any weapon: the idea that freedom was worth fighting for no matter what the cost. 2 years had passed since the Zephyrian invasion began, and the galaxy was no longer the same place. What had started as a simple conquest had become a nightmare that spread across dozens of star systems. The humans had done something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had turned their own defeat into a weapon. Admiral Costel stood in his command center aboard the flagship Eternal Victory, but there was no victory in sight. The ship's name had become a bitter joke among his officers. Reports flowed in from across Zephyrian space, each one worse than the last. "Admiral," his intelligence officer reported, "we have confirmed human military activity in 17 different star systems. They are not just attacking our supply lines anymore. They are directly assaulting our colonies and military installations." The Admiral studied the holographic map that showed the entire Zephyrian Empire. Red markers indicated planets under human attack. Yellow markers showed worlds experiencing rebellion inspired by human broadcasts. Blue markers represented their own military forces, and there were far fewer blue markers than there had been 2 years ago. "How is this possible?" Costel asked, though he knew the answer would not make him feel better. 2 years ago, humans had no faster-than-light travel. Now they are fighting us on multiple fronts across the galaxy. The intelligence officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, our analysis suggests that human technological development has accelerated beyond anything we have ever seen. They are not just copying our technology. They are improving it and combining it with their own innovations in ways we never considered." This was the truth that the Zephyrian Empire was struggling to accept. Human scientists and engineers were not just smart. They were desperately motivated. Every human researcher knew that their species' survival depended on outthinking an enemy, with thousands of years of technological advantage. That kind of motivation had produced miracles. In a hidden asteroid base in the outer Sol system, Dr. Chen met with the human military leadership to discuss their latest achievements. The base was one of dozens that humans had built using captured alien construction equipment. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary asteroid. Inside, it contained laboratories, factories, and docking bays for the growing human fleet. "Report on our current capabilities," President Martinez requested. She had aged visibly during the 2 years of war, but her determination had only grown stronger. Dr. Chen activated a holographic display. "We now have 87 operational starships ranging from small scout vessels to medium cruisers. Our weapons technology has advanced to the point where our ships can compete with Zephyrian vessels of similar size." General Harrison, who now commanded all human space forces, added his own report. "Our tactics have proven effective across multiple theaters. We avoid large-scale battles where the enemy's numerical advantage matters. Instead, we hit fast and hard, then disappear before they can respond effectively." But Dr. Chen had more to report, and this was the part that would change everything. "We have also achieved something that I believe is unique in galactic history. We have learned to broadcast our message directly into alien computer networks across the galaxy." She paused to let this sink in. "Every species under Zephyrian rule is now receiving our transmissions. We are not just fighting the Empire militarily, we are fighting them ideologically." This was the human secret weapon that the aliens had never expected. Humans understood something about communication and propaganda that most alien species did not. They knew how to make their cause seem noble and their enemies seem evil. They knew how to inspire others to fight for freedom. The broadcasts that reached oppressed species throughout the galaxy were carefully crafted to appeal to universal desires for freedom and dignity. But they also contained practical information about resistance tactics, weapons manufacturing, and guerrilla warfare. On the mining world of Tau Ceti III, a group of hegemony workers gathered secretly to listen to the latest human transmission. The signal was hidden inside normal commercial traffic, but those who knew what to look for could decode the message. The voice belonged to Maria Santos, who had become one of the human resistance's most effective propagandists. "To our friends throughout the galaxy, we bring news from Earth. The Zephyrian occupation continues, but we are no longer just defending our world. We are hunting our enemies across the stars." The message continued with technical details about how to sabotage alien mining equipment, how to organize secret communication networks, and how to turn industrial tools into weapons. But the most important part was always the same. Remember that you have the right to be free. No species, no matter how advanced or powerful, has the right to rule another species against their will. Resistance is not only possible, it is your duty to yourselves and your children. These broadcasts were having an effect that went far beyond what the humans had expected. Species throughout the galaxy were beginning to question the natural order that had existed for thousands of years. The idea that advanced civilizations had the right to rule primitive ones was being challenged for the first time in galactic history. On the crystalline homeworld, a group of philosophers met to discuss the implications of human resistance. The Crystalline Confederacy had supported the invasion of Earth because they believed it would bring humans into the civilized galactic community. Now they were beginning to have doubts. "The humans raise an interesting question," observed philosopher Crystal Mind. "By what right do we force our concept of civilization on others? Perhaps the humans prefer their own way of life to ours." This kind of thinking was spreading throughout the galaxy, and it terrified the leadership of every major empire. If species began to believe that they had the right to reject alien rule, the entire structure of galactic civilization could collapse. But the humans were not content to simply inspire rebellion. They were actively hunting down the aliens who had invaded their world. Captain Sarah Martinez, daughter of the Earth's president, commanded the human ship Defiance as it prowled the space lanes near Zephyrian military installations. Her ship was small and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks against larger vessels. "Contact on sensors," reported her navigator. "Zephyrian supply convoy, 3 cargo ships with 2 escort cruisers." Captain Martinez studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian ships were larger and more heavily armed than her vessel, but they were also slower and less maneuverable. More importantly, they would not be expecting an attack this far from Earth. "Battle stations," she ordered. "Remember, we are not just fighting for Earth anymore. Every alien ship we destroy is one less weapon they can use against other species fighting for their freedom. The attack was swift and brutal. The Defiance appeared suddenly from behind an asteroid, fired a spread of modified alien torpedoes at the cargo ships, and disappeared before the escort cruisers could respond. Within minutes, 3 Zephyrian supply ships were drifting wrecks, and their cargo of weapons and supplies was scattered across space. But before leaving the area, Captain Martinez activated the ship's communication array and broadcast a message on all frequencies. "This is Captain Martinez of the human vessel Defiance. The cargo ships you just lost were carrying weapons to be used against innocent civilians. Every weapon we destroy is a life we save. To the Zephyrian Empire we say this: we will hunt you across the galaxy. We will never forget what you did to our world. We will never forgive you. And we will never stop." These messages were as important as the military attacks themselves. The humans wanted every alien in the galaxy to know that Earth had not been conquered. They wanted their enemies to live in fear, and their potential allies to know that resistance was possible. Admiral Costel received reports of dozens of similar attacks each week. Human ships were appearing throughout Zephyrian space, attacking military convoys, destroying supply depots, and broadcasting their message of defiance. His empire was being bled to death by 1,000 small cuts. But the military attacks were only part of the problem. The ideological war was even more dangerous. Reports arrived daily of rebellions on worlds that had been peaceful under Zephyrian rule for decades. On the agricultural world of Kepler 442b, farmers had stopped delivering food to Zephyrian collection centers. When military forces arrived to force compliance, they found that the crops had been poisoned. The farmers would rather starve than feed their oppressors. On the industrial world of HD 4307G, factory workers had sabotaged production lines that manufactured weapons for the Zephyrian military. When security forces tried to arrest the saboteurs, they discovered that entire communities were protecting them. Most disturbing of all, some Zephyrian citizens were beginning to question their own government's actions. Young Zephyrians who had grown up listening to human broadcasts were asking uncomfortable questions about their empire's right to rule other species. The breaking point came when the hegemony of Thousand Suns formally declared war on the Zephyrian Empire. Chancellor Raktul announced that his government could no longer stand by while the Zephyrians committed acts of aggression against innocent species throughout the galaxy. "The invasion of Earth has shown the true nature of the Zephyrian Empire," the Chancellor declared in a galaxy-wide broadcast. "They are not civilized protectors bringing order to primitive worlds. They are conquerors who use force to impose their will on others. The hegemony stands with Earth and all species fighting for their freedom." Within days, the Crystalline Confederacy and the Aquatic Dominion made similar declarations. The galaxy was choosing sides, and the Zephyrian Empire found itself increasingly isolated. Admiral Costel realized that his invasion of Earth had accomplished exactly the opposite of what it was supposed to do. Instead of demonstrating Zephyrian power and discouraging rebellion, it had inspired resistance throughout the galaxy and united former enemies against his empire. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, the Admiral requested permission to use the Empire's most powerful weapons against Earth. If they could destroy the human homeworld completely, it might discourage other species from following the human example. But the response from the Zephyrian High Command was not what he expected. Emperor Zethkal himself spoke to the Admiral via secure communication. "Admiral Costel, the Empire faces a choice. We can escalate this conflict and risk losing everything, or we can find a way to end it before it destroys us completely." The Emperor paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of terrible decision. "You will prepare for a strategic withdrawal from the Sol system. We cannot afford to continue this war." The Admiral could not believe what he was hearing. "Your Majesty, if we withdraw from Earth, it will be seen as a defeat. Our enemies will become bolder, our allies will lose confidence, and rebellions will spread throughout the Empire." "Admiral," the Emperor replied coldly, "rebellions are already spreading throughout the Empire. Our enemies are already attacking us on multiple fronts. Our allies are already questioning their loyalty. The humans have already won the most important battle. They have changed how the galaxy thinks about freedom and resistance." The truth was painful but undeniable. The humans had transformed their own invasion into a galactic revolution. Their message of resistance had spread farther and faster than their ships ever could. They had proven that even the most powerful empire could be challenged by determined opponents who refused to surrender. But the humans were not finished. Even as the Zephyrian Empire prepared to withdraw from Earth, human ships continued their hunting missions throughout alien space. They had made a promise to hunt their enemies across the galaxy, and they intended to keep that promise. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of easy conquest was over. From now on, every empire would have to consider the possibility that their victims might choose to fight back. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human voices continued to broadcast the most dangerous message in galactic history. Resistance is not futile. Freedom is worth fighting for. And we will never surrender. 5 years after the first Zephyrian ship entered the Sol system, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The great empires that had ruled for thousands of years were crumbling, new alliances were forming, and the word freedom had become the most powerful force in galactic politics. The Zephyrian Empire, once the mightiest civilization in known space, was fragmenting. Admiral Kostal stood in what had once been the Empire's most secure command center, but the walls were scorched from recent battles, and half the computer systems were offline. Outside, he could hear the sounds of fighting as Zephyrian security forces battled rebels in the streets of their own capital city. "Admiral," reported his last remaining communications officer, "we have lost contact with the Outer Rim territories. The rebellion there appears to be complete." Kostal nodded grimly. The Outer Rim had been home to dozens of species that the Zephyrian Empire had conquered over the centuries. For generations, these species had accepted alien rule as a fact of life. But after hearing human broadcasts about resistance and freedom, they had risen up simultaneously across multiple star systems. The Admiral thought about the warnings that old Counselor Vexhai had given 5 years ago. The ancient Thalorian had tried to tell them that attacking humans would awaken something dangerous. But no one had listened. Now the entire galaxy was paying the price. On Earth, President Martinez stood in the rebuilt White House, looking out at a city that had been destroyed and rebuilt twice during the war. The Zephyrian occupation forces had finally withdrawn 6 months ago, but the human fleet continued to hunt alien military units throughout the galaxy. "Madam President," said General Harrison, "we have received another request for assistance. The Andorian coalition is asking for our help in their rebellion against the hegemony protectorates." Martinez sighed. These requests came in daily now. Species throughout the galaxy wanted human military advisors, human weapons technology, and most importantly, human inspiration for their own independence movements. "What is our current fleet status?" she asked. Dr. Chen, now serving as the Director of Human Space Operations, consulted her tablet. "We have 347 operational starships. Our technology is now equal or superior to anything the major empires possess. But, Madam President, we cannot fight every battle for every oppressed species in the galaxy. This was the problem that humans had not anticipated. Their successful resistance against the Zephyrian Empire had inspired liberation movements everywhere. But many of these movements expected Earth to lead their fights for them. The humans were beginning to understand that freedom was something each species had to win for themselves. President Martinez made a decision that would define humanity's role in the new galactic order. "Send the Andorians our standard response. We will provide technical assistance, training, and moral support, but we will not fight their war for them. Freedom cannot be given as a gift. It must be earned." This had become human policy throughout the galaxy. They would share their knowledge, their technology, and their experience. But each species that wanted freedom would have to prove they were willing to fight for it themselves. The policy was controversial among human military leaders. Many officers wanted to use their technological advantages to free every oppressed species in the galaxy, but the political leadership understood something important. If humans fought everyone's battles for them, they would just become another galactic empire. Meanwhile, in the ruins of the former Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime, an emergency session was taking place. The great space station had been damaged in battles between various factions, and only half the original council members were still in power. Counselor Vexhai, now impossibly ancient even by Thalorian standards, sat in his usual place. He was one of the few beings in the galaxy who could say he had predicted the current chaos. But there was no satisfaction in being right about such a terrible prediction. The emergency session had been called to discuss the collapse of galactic civilization. In the 5 years since the invasion of Earth began, 3 major empires had fallen completely. Dozens of smaller governments had been overthrown by their own citizens. Trade routes that had operated for centuries were now battlegrounds between liberation movements and imperial remnants. Ambassador Korthala of the Tentacled Dominion spoke first. The situation is completely out of control. The humans have destroyed the stability that took us thousands of years to build. But Vexhai slowly stood up, his ancient voice still carrying to every corner of the damaged chamber. The humans did not destroy galactic stability. They revealed that it was never real stability at all. It was oppression disguised as order. The old Thalorian walked to the center of the chamber, just as he had 5 years ago when he tried to warn them about attacking Earth. For thousands of years, we told ourselves that conquest and empire were natural parts of galactic civilization. We believed that advanced species had the right to rule primitive ones. We called it bringing order to chaos. He gestured at the empty seats where representatives of fallen empires once sat. But the humans showed us what we really were. We were bullies who had never been challenged by anyone willing to fight back. The moment we encountered a species that refused to accept domination, our entire system collapsed. The remaining council members listened in uncomfortable silence. Many of them were beginning to understand that the old galactic order was never coming back. The age of empires was ending, and no one knew what would replace it. On the former Zephyrian homeworld, Emperor Zethkol sat in his private chambers, reading reports from across what remained of his empire. Most of the outer territories were now independent. Many of the core worlds were in rebellion. His mighty military had been reduced to a fraction of its former strength. Messenger brought him the latest communication from Earth. President Martinez had sent a personal message to all former galactic leaders, offering what she called reconciliation and reconstruction. To the leaders of the former empires, the message read, "Humanity does not seek revenge for the invasion of our world. We understand that you acted according to the beliefs and customs of your time, but that time is over. The galaxy has changed, and we must all change with it." The message continued with an offer that the Emperor found both generous and humiliating. Earth is prepared to share our technological advances with all species, including our former enemies. We are willing to provide assistance in rebuilding your civilizations, according to new principles of freedom and self-determination. Emperor Zethkol realized that the humans were offering him something unprecedented in galactic history, the chance for a defeated enemy to rebuild with dignity. But the price was accepting that the old ways of conquest and empire were wrong. It was a difficult choice for someone who had been raised to believe in Zephyrian superiority. But looking at the reports of rebellions and civil wars throughout his former empire, the Emperor began to understand that the humans were offering the only path to peace. In a secret meeting with his remaining advisors, the Emperor made a decision that would have been unthinkable 5 years earlier. "Prepare a formal surrender to Earth," he ordered. But not just a military surrender, a surrender of the entire imperial system. "We will ask the humans to help us rebuild our civilization according to their principles." The advisors were shocked. Some protested that it would be better to fight to the end than to accept such humiliation. But the Emperor had learned something from observing human behavior during the war. "The humans do not fight for conquest or revenge," he explained. "They fight for ideas, and their ideas are stronger than our weapons. If we want to survive as a species, we must embrace those ideas ourselves." This decision by the former Zephyrian Emperor became the template for ending the galactic civil wars. One by one, the surviving imperial governments began negotiating with human mediators. The process was slow and difficult, but gradually, a new kind of galactic civilization began to emerge. Dr. Chen, now serving as Earth's chief science advisor for galactic reconstruction, stood before a gathering of alien scientists and engineers. The meeting was taking place on a neutral space station that had been built specifically for interspecies cooperation. "The key to preventing future wars," she explained, "is making sure that every species has the technology and resources needed for independence. We are not going to create a human empire to replace the old alien empires. Instead, we are going to help every species become strong enough to defend their own freedom." This was the revolutionary concept that humans brought to galactic politics. Instead of one species ruling others, each species would rule itself. Instead of empires controlling resources and trade, independent worlds would cooperate as equals. The plan was ambitious and difficult. Many species had been under alien rule for so long that they had forgotten how to govern themselves. Others were suspicious of human motives, believing that Earth must want something in return for their assistance. But slowly, the new system began to work. Former imperial worlds learned to manage their own affairs. Trade networks reformed along lines of mutual benefit rather than imperial tribute. Most importantly, the idea of conquest began to seem as outdated as slavery or cannibalism. 10 years after the first Zephyrian ship entered the Sol system, Councillor Vexai attended what would be the last meeting of the old Galactic Council. The ancient Thalorian was now so old that he needed mechanical assistance to stand, but he insisted on delivering one final speech. "I have lived through the rise and fall of 7 galactic empires," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying to every corner of the chamber. "I have seen species conquer and be conquered, rule and be ruled, but I have never seen anything like what the humans have accomplished." He paused, gathering strength for his final words. The humans did not just defend their world. They defended an idea that was almost forgotten in our galaxy, the idea that intelligent beings have the right to be free. They reminded us that freedom is not a gift that advanced species give to primitive ones. It is a birthright that belongs to every thinking creature in the universe. The old Thalorian looked around the chamber one last time. The age of empires is over. The age of freedom has begun, and we have the humans to thank for showing us the way. As Vexai finished speaking, representatives from across the galaxy rose to their feet in recognition. Many of them were from species that had gained their independence because of human inspiration and assistance. Others were from former imperial species that had learned to live without ruling others. The final vote of the old Galactic Council was unanimous. The imperial system was formally abolished. In its place, a new organization would be created, the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds. On Earth, President Martinez watched the vote on a live broadcast. Around her sat the human leaders who had guided their species through the most difficult period in their history. They had survived an alien invasion, liberated dozens of oppressed species, and fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization. "What do you think our grandchildren will make of all this?" asked General Harrison. Martinez smiled as she thought about the question. "I think they will grow up in a galaxy where no one has to live in fear of conquest, where every species has the right to determine their own destiny, where the word empire is something they read about in history books." She paused, watching as alien delegates celebrated the end of the imperial age. "Most importantly, I think they will understand that freedom is not just a human value. It is a universal value, and it is worth fighting for no matter what the cost." But perhaps the most important change was one that could not be measured in votes or treaties or technological advances. The humans had taught the galaxy something that had been forgotten for thousands of years. That ordinary beings, when faced with oppression, had the power to say no. That simple word, no, had toppled empires, liberated billions of beings, and changed the course of galactic history. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, the human message continued to echo. We will never surrender. We will never stop fighting for freedom, and we will never forget that every intelligent being in the universe has the right to be free. The galaxy had learned the price of awakening the humans, but in the end that price had purchased something more valuable than any empire, a future where freedom was possible for everyone.